Yeah, so around 23 weeks in our pregnancy, we had just moved into this house, and I was 23 weeks pregnant with Travis. And then I went into early labor, and so I was hospitalized for 3 days. And so we're sitting on like strict bed rest and like bored out of our minds because we're just like, and I can't even get up to go pee. Like, what do I do for 3 days? We hadn't come up with a name for him yet. And so we were kind of deciding between the name Travis and the name Bryce because we love Bryce Canyon. We love hiking. And so anyway, we narrowed it down to Bryce and Travis. And then we're just like Googling. We're like, what do they each name mean? And so Bryce, we looked up, it's like some like Nordic name for freckle. And we're like, I mean, if Travis ever, like if he ever Googles his name and he's like, you named me Freckle, like maybe that's not like the best name to go with. So then we're like, well, let's look up Travis. And the meaning of Travis is crossroads. And we're like here in the hospital, like, am I gonna stay pregnant or are we gonna have a 23-weeker like today, you know? And we're like, well, that's fitting. Like, let's go with Travis. So we decided to name him Travis like then and there. And then we realized it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like literally, like every step of the way, we're like, is he gonna learn how to sleep train or not? Is he gonna learn how to nurse or not? Is he gonna, and then when developmentally things were kind of slowing down and we were unsure of what his future was, we're like, well, that's Travis. So when you see me like rolling my eyes and being like, oh, Trav, like, I mean, literally that's like where that came from because we're like, well, we're at another crossroads. We have no idea. But thank God he's in control, right? So yeah, I think there are times though when Tom and I joke, we're like, oh, we should have just named him Freckle. What, like, maybe he would have come out with a giant freckle on his face, but you know, it would have been maybe slightly easier than Travis. But yeah, that's how we got his name. Back around the time he was around 18 months old, we noticed that there were just some things, quirks about him that weren't quite lining up with how our older son Mitchell was developing. And I think too, professionally, I'm a pediatric PT, so I was able to notice a lot of things about him that I'd seen in a lot of my patient population. And so we started the assessment process, and then by the age of 2, he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum disorder, and he was diagnosed high functioning because he is verbal. But yeah, he's not always functionally verbal. He says a lot, but it doesn't always make sense. But yeah, so for the last year and a half, we've been just negotiating this new normal with him and learning how to go to all these therapy appointments and managing all his IEPs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, but it's been definitely a sanctifying journey for sure. When the special needs ministry first started, it was nice to have the opportunity to serve as a one-on-one and a shadow. I think, again, kind of that professional training and being a pediatric PT, especially working with the sensory integration like population, I was able to see a lot in different children in church, but then always not knowing how to be able to kind of step in and help out. And so I was so thankful that the ministry was available, and you know, and thankful that God blessed me with kind of professional skills and background to be more effective, you know, when I'm shadowing them. And then, yeah, I think for sure once we lived a life with a child with a disability, I think just being in our church family was just so comforting, like knowing that people know us, people know him, and people are here to love and support us, you know. So I think it's been a very positive experience with our church family in that way. So we always joke that our children are, or have been, our greatest sanctifiers, and Travis in particular is the sharpest sanctifier in my life. But I think, you know, being able to look back at like all of God's grace and all the pieces that he's put together in terms of even just my career that he blessed me with as a pediatric PT, and then being able to move us back to Torrance, where we had access to our extended families who could support us and give us babysitting and respite whenever we need it. And then for sure, like growing this bridge ministry at Lighthouse and being able to support us in that way. Also being back in Torrance gives us access to Torrance Unified School District, which has an amazing preschool special education program. And then even being in Regional Center, it was nice that we got to go to the early intervention program back at Pediatric Therapy Network, which was my first employer out of school. So it kind of came full circle, and I knew a lot of the therapists and the assistants who were at PTN, so they loved on my child more than I think some of the other kids. But like all those graces, you're like, there's no way. Like, God is so good, like God knew to give Travis this family and this church body and this school district, and he just lavished upon us in that way. And so I think for us, like just being able to see, like tangibly see, like his faithfulness and just his grace. And I think just knowing that, like, trusting in him and being obedient to his call for us, like he's gonna bless that in ways that we would never have understood. We're like, oh, we're moving back to Torrance, but it's because 2 years later, we're gonna have a child who needs all the special education programs that Torrance offers, So I think, that's just it's been very humbling and just very continuing to just give us awe for like how great God is and just how much he loves us in that way, so.
Purple E, okay. So what word are you making?
Gummy bears.
Gummy bears. Do you like to eat gummy bears? Good morning, Sarah. Good to see you again.
I've been involved with Bridge Ministry for about 3 years now. It's kind of crazy. I think it was May of 2014 when Pastor Jesse Terasaki emailed some of the Beacon students about possibly involving themselves in a new ministry that we were trying to start at Lighthouse. And it was mainly for the families with special needs. And I remember receiving that email and just being like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know, like I've had some experience with this growing up, but it's going to be kind of interesting doing it in the church environment, So for the last 3 years now, kind of just been doing what's called shadowing. What we've been doing is called shadowing. And so I'm paired up with one of the students on a particular service, either first or second service. And generally what we do is the goal of the shadow is to help the student to worship God, right? So however we can do that, whether it's even just sitting with them in Sunday service for the musical worship, or helping them with listening to the little message in Sunday school in the classrooms, or participating in the craft, right? So whatever we could do to just help them worship God. So that's one of the goals, I think, in regards to Bridge Ministry. But I think the second goal, too, which is just as important, is help to promote the worship of the family as well, right? So helping the kid to worship God, and hopefully that gives even their family the opportunity to really focus on their worship as well, and to just be blessed by the church body. I think it's a great opportunity to serve. So for 3 years now, it's just been really cool to see the ministry growing, and really an honor to serve in it too. I think the main way serving in this ministry has impacted my life is, one, I've learned how to love people particularly, to really see the unique gifts that God has given each individual as part of this church body, right? And that's been so huge, because what I've had to focus on for each kid that I've worked with is, what are some of the factors that promote their worship or promote their focus, and what are some of the factors that hinder their worship or hinder their ability to focus, right? And so when I look at these different factors, it's trying to figure out, what can I do? What can I do with what I've been given, with what I know, to make this an environment optimal for their worship, right? And for them to know God. And the way that this impacts their life is, that's how it should be for all of our ministry. Each person is uniquely gifted by God. Each person is uniquely created by God. And for me to remember that yeah, my goal here is not to make these kids more like the other kids or make these kids behave perfectly. My goal is to make them more like Christ, and not that it's in my power, but it's obviously God's power and his timing, but that's the goal. And I think the same thing applies to all ministry, right? Like where I'm really trying to understand each individual uniquely, what makes them tick, what makes them frustrated, what makes them really excited, and I need to know these things about them so that I can be praying for them, so that I could be asking them maybe even the hard questions, maybe even asking them to do harder things once in a while, right? But yeah, I just think it's really important for me to have learned how to more adequately understand the unique needs of individuals and the unique circumstances of them so that I can serve them appropriately. I definitely have encouragements for those who are thinking about starting serving in this ministry, as well as maybe those who are not at this time. Definitely the same encouragement is to just love these individuals. Whether you're going to serve them and maybe be with them on a week-to-week basis, or even if you just have this one opportunity where you see them maybe sitting or standing alone, maybe you're near them at service even, just love these families, love these students, these individuals, definitely take time out of your day to encourage them. And don't just make them feel like a visitor, make them feel like part of the church family, because that's what they are. If they're a part of our body here, they're as much a part of this family as we are. And so really just invest in them, care for them, pray for them, right? We could do so much to impact each other's lives in this church and in this ministry. So yeah, and if you are considering serving, I would definitely encourage you to at least talk to the leaders to learn more about the ministry. Maybe even just shadow one of the kids with us for a day. I think you'll learn so much for the sake of this ministry, but also even just for your ministry with anyone. I think, like I said, about loving people individually, particularly, and even seeing that, yeah, this isn't a ministry about being perfect. This isn't a ministry about doing it only because you're good at it. None of us are professionals because none of us can bring about the greatest change that these kids need, which is to have a heart that loves God, right? And so that's what we need to do, but that's why we have God, because he's so gracious in giving us wisdom on how to do that. So I would encourage you, if you're considering this ministry, to not focus on what you don't know or the experiences you don't have, or even the experiences that you do have and what you do know, but focus more on how can God use you through this ministry. And he can, if you're a Christian, God can use you in this ministry. God can use you to encourage these families, to encourage these students, and to really just expose them to the love that God's already shown you. And so I really encourage you to just prayerfully consider serving. That would really be helpful to these families and also to the ministry as a whole.